Well, I believe that we are live at this point. Wanted to give everybody a chance to join in. Of course, get your, Monday night dinner, something to snack on. We've got a really important conversation that this community has been waiting to have. And here we are, everybody. So we want to welcome you all to this special town hall tonight. We have the Bishop Joseph Walker III of Mount Zion Church, not just known in the city, but around the world. And we have with us Acting Chief Drake of the Metro Police Department, who they're going to answer questions tonight. Y'all know me, I've got multiple pages of notes. You all will also get a chance to ask your questions of both of these men during such a critical time in our community, where there is so much tension, so much division, but so much love and hope as well to give. So we want to invite you to not only listen, but as the conversation goes, to put your questions there in the conversation below. We're going to get to them towards the end. But first, before we get into all that, I want to open it up to welcome the man and to give them a chance to say hello to Nashville. Bishop Walker, Chief Drake, good evening to you.
Good evening. Good evening.
Good evening.
Glad to be with you tonight. Awesome.
You know, one of the things, Bishop Walker, I know that Mount Zion has, in time of crisis, in time of need, has always stepped up in the community. And we saw what happened with the Breonna Taylor investigation, no doubt, really the driving force, the precipice, if you will, behind tonight's conversation. Give us just a little bit about why you felt like tonight's conversation was important.
Well, first of all, again, I want to thank Acting Chief Drake for participating on this particular conversation, because I think it's important. Mount Zion is historically many of these issues that we know affect our community. And one of the biggest issues of recent has been this issue of the administration of justice and policing in our community. And we just feel like there's so much lament, so much disgust, if you will, in terms of what we've been able to see in real time on television and, on the internet, just so much in regards to what we feel has not been adequate policing, adequate respect for Black and brown bodies in our community. And so we just feel like it's important to really have a discussion, a very candid and open discussion, but also move from that discussion to really be bridge builders, really bring our community together. Nashville is such a unique space. And I think that what is possible in this city can really be a precedent for cities across America because of the unique space that Nashville has. Now, it doesn't mean we don't have problems, doesn't mean we don't have things to work on, but I really believe in our city. I believe in our ability to work through these tough issues and really come up with some viable solutions when we do it in collaboration. So Mount Zion is just one of many churches that are very passionate about this issue. And of course, I just felt the importance of taking the lead on this to say, listen, we've got to do more than just cry out loud. We've really got to have serious and substantive conversations and then move toward some solutions that we all can partner in to make our community a better place, make relationship with police officers better, and ultimately, I believe Nashville can really rise and shine through this.
Well, and then Chief Drake, before we really get into the questions, obviously, there are dozens who have applied and qualified for the position of Chief of Police. No question, have been acting in that position. Again, before we hop into these questions, this is a very particular conversation where we're talking about the relationship between the Black and brown communities and the police department, which you're leading at this time. Why is this conversation important to you?
Well, first of all, good evening, Bishop Walker, Ms. Harriet Wallace, the congregation of Mount Zion, and the citizens of Nashville. Thank you so much for having me on. I'm grateful for this opportunity to talk about policing in Nashville, my vision for change, and how the city can come together. 2020 has not been an easy year. We've had a tornado, we've had a national pandemic. We've worked to stabilize through a tornado, through North Nashville, East Nashville, Hermitage. And through all of this, COVID-19 has impacted us. It's also impacted our police department. We've had over 50 officers that have contracted coronavirus, and thankfully they're all back to work safely. But these tragedies, these senseless tragedies we've had Breonna Taylor in Louisville, March 13th, George Floyd in Minneapolis, and Jacob Blake in Kenosha, Wisconsin, all are troubling. And so it's a real need in our community to come together, and we really appreciate Mount Zion, for Bishop Walker, and for your efforts to bring us together.
Well, Chief Drake, let's go ahead and jump right into that. You mentioned Breonna Taylor. We had a similar situation with Azaria Hines in the Edge Hill community. We saw the swift response that you had to that. Can you first, very quickly, not for an extended answer, but what is the no-knock policy for the Nashville Metro Police Department, just so everyone will know?
So we don't have a no-knock policy. So in Nashville, there is a provision for no-knock warrants. We haven't done a no-knock warrant in over 20 years. You can get one, but only through the chief of police. And I can't see any reason where I would authorize one right now, unless it was a serial killer. They had hostages in a house and you had to get in to save people. I think it would be that extreme for me to authorize one. So with that being said, I just don't believe in no-knock warrants. They're too dangerous.
Well, and let me ask you, because, you know, there is a nationwide call, even locally, for police reform, for quick response, for even defunding the police department. What's your position on calls to defund the police? Where do you stand on police reform? There's been criticism that the previous chief and the department as a whole was resistant to reform. You've been part of the police department, so if you're in that position, how will you respond to calls to defund the police department? How will you institute police reform?
So the way I look at defunding police, we're about 1,511 authorized police officers. We're 80 officers short. And so if we defund the police, then you will have to look at cutting personnel. And having 1,511 officers, even if we were fully staffed, we would still be 200 to 300 officers short to be able to make this city safe. Just a few miles away in Memphis, they have less residents than we have, less geographical area, and over 500 more police officers. So when we look at calling to defund the police, I don't really advocate for that. I defend that we need more, but I also think we need to allocate more resources towards crisis intervention, towards youth crime, towards homelessness, affordable housing, and those things. I really believe in reform. I believe that there's different approaches that we can use. We need to look at how we do use of force. Around the country, I believe there's been a sense of urgency for various reasons when officers can pull back and take time to think about the situation and make an assessment. And so as we look at that, we look at crisis intervention, we can look at a different approach to that as well. We don't have to have police officers responding to all mental health crises. Maybe we can partner with the mobile crisis or other mental health professionals and have police officers in plainclothes that can actually respond to these incidents. In these incidents where you have crisis situations, the uniform actually escalates the situation usually. And so I actually had a meeting with Mobile Crisis today at having a co-response situation or co-response team, and it was very receptive to it. So I really envision reform and envision reimagining how we can do policing all together.
Bishop Walker, let me bring you into this because the church has always been given a lot of responsibility, and with that responsibility comes criticism that not enough is being done. I know that Mount Zion, in time of tornado, COVID, calls for social justice, Mount Zion has been present. What do you see as the church, the Black church's role in supporting and representing the Black and Brown communities and holding police accountable? And what's Mount Zion's role in all of that, and making sure if Chief Drake here is named permanent or whoever it may be, what will be Mount Zion's role or the Black church's responsibility in holding them accountable for equitable policing?
Well, thank you for the question. And, I believe that it is certainly incumbent upon the church to really utilize its influence to galvanize leaders together and galvanize the community together to really become a united front, a collaborative model to really hold not only our police, but even our elected officials accountable. Remember, a lot of the things that police are enforcing are laws that are on the books that in some sense may not be favorable to our community. So it's important that we really do hold our elected officials accountable. Also, and one of the things that I appreciate even about Chief Drake is his ability to want to have conversations with leaders in cohorts, in communities, to really be, involved in hearing, feet to the ground, what is the pulse of the community. And I think that it's important for the church to create those conversations, to be that liaison between policing and the community, because the church has always been a trusted partner, and leadership in the church has always been a trusted partner. And so I think it's also incumbent upon us to help our folks in terms of advocating for voting and providing the resources that people need to help them get to the polls and to educate them. We partnered with, Promote the Vote, Equity Alliance, and those organizations, really helping to educate our people about the significance of voting, what they're voting for, why it's important to vote, why it's important to be civically engaged. And so, yeah, we have a huge responsibility. And for me personally, if I can just say, for me, I just believe that if you're going to do the work, you don't have to broadcast it. You can do that work behind the scenes and get the measurable result that you need by really building bridges. Nothing is going to happen if we're just yelling at each other and nobody's having civil conversations about real solutions. And I think it's important now when Chief talks about reform, he's talking about some of those things you just heard about, the mental health thing. That's huge in our community with the amount of mental health issues, and being able to partner and come alongside agencies that can co-respond in those moments. That helps us as leaders to say to our congregations that here is a way in which we can de-escalate these crises and not put Black and brown bodies in these situations where their lives could be in jeopardy because of mental health issues that are rampant in our community. And that's just one way. So I appreciate Chief for that and other things that reform will bring. And so I think it is important. And listen, we as faith leaders, we appreciate the relationship, but we're here to represent our people. We're here to say, look, our people are angry, they are frustrated, they want to see some real results, and it's our responsibility to keep pushing that and sharing. And really, I'm okay with getting on Chief's nerve, because I want him to know that our folks.
Now, we're recording this, so it's on the record.
I know it, because I want to know, we are serious about this. We're not going to let up now, because we got a great opportunity in this amazing city we call Nashville.
Mm-hmm.
And the other thing, that's important, we've got to kind of get into some of this meat of this a little bit. Okay, we're about to really dig in. Chief Drake, there has been concern with the relationship between the Metro Police Department and the Oversight Board when it comes to records requests, when it comes to really just access to the documents that they need, even when an investigation is going on, to make sure there is a fair investigation and response to the concerns and complaints of those who have issue with police officers. So what is your position and perspective of the COB? I know you've met with them already, but we're really getting under the hood of this thing. What will you do to work alongside them and make sure that they've got the access, and not just lip service, Chief, but what will be done to make sure they've got the access and all the resources that they need to do the proper and fair investigation that the city of Nashville elected them and appointed them to do?
Thank you for that question. The citizens of Nashville have spoken. Over 130,000 voted for the COB, and I fully support their services. In fact, from the very first time I sat down as the interim chief of police, I started trying to make a rapport with Jill Fitcher, the executive director. And it's been good. I've called her on occasion, and I think she was a little bit shocked that, hey, this is what happened. Let me tell you what's going on. And
she's like, what? I'm not used to these calls. Okay, go ahead.
Just trying to make sure she's in the loop. But at the same time, we've had discussions about the MOU, and we finally have got it drawn out to where we'll sign it this week. The last glitch that
Are we breaking news right here live on Facebook? Because people have asked me, are you going to sign that MOU?
I'm going to sign it. And so
okay.
the This was just an agreement between another entity, not the police department. And so that's been worked out. So we're ready to move forward and let them do their work. So I'm 100% believe in giving them the ability to do their investigations. And one, they have to have that MOU, they have to have access to records. And we've come to that conclusion.
Very good. All right.
In that area, that I could just say, that is like, you know, one of the things that I think like the community needs to hear, because that has been a big issue around transparency. And I think that this speaks to progress. And I think it's something we should really, in this moment, you know, just kind of put a pin there and celebrate this moment, because that is a very courageous thing to do, but it's the right thing to do. And I think that I want to applaud you, Chief, for that, because that's something the community has been waiting on. You know, we've got to have full transparency, where that's how trust begins to be reestablished between police departments and between communities. So thank you for that.
I totally agree. And that's what we want. We want mutual trust. You know, we want that relationship. And so we're going to work towards that.
All right, Chief. You know, I'm going to cut these sound bites and I'm going to air them because you said it on record. All right. So now let me ask you also, again, as we continue to dig a little bit deeper. Now, you know, I put it out there, you respond. There have been some who said, you know what? He's been inside the police department, the same department we've had concerns with. The previous chief promoted him. He's going to be part of the same old thing. What is your response to that? And how do you plan to separate yourself? I mean, because there's been resistance to CLB, you addressed that, resistance to reform, not a lot of accountability. A lot of people have said, and if you've been a part of the police department, are they going to get the same thing if you're named permanent chief?
Well, what they're going to get is a different person. I mean, you know, I was promoted by the chief and, you know, I've come up through the ranks, but 30 years, I'm still my own person. I've already made decisions that are different from what his were. We're going to centralize the homicide unit, one to have better clearance rates. We're moving away from the flex teams, which were highly proactive. They were designed to go into neighborhoods and suppress crime, but the unintended consequence was they was over-policing in areas. So one of the first things I did was start community engagement teams. So those community engagement teams go where people are. You know, we've historically had community meetings, and we get people there that are, you know, want to be part of the community. Every now and then you get someone that's not unhappy about something, but we weren't able to effectively reach people where they were. And so we have community engagement teams that can go in, they can have rapport with neighborhoods. So one, they can know, the officers can know, you know, the value of the community, but the community can get to know officers as well. And I think that's good. I think that eliminates the fear of police, the fear of the unknown. And so we also do tutoring. We do some movie nights, ice cream nights, and several other community engagement initiatives just to build rapport. And that's totally different from the mindset of the past. And there's several more things that's coming down the pipe. So.
All right, now Bishop, I'm not trying to steal your thunder, but I'm gonna work it a little bit like church. So when I say something, you got to respond back with an amen, okay? You got to turn to your neighbor on Zoom and say, I see. Now, every time he says something, I'm going to say, what you going to say amen?
Amen, I love it.
God, man, that's his response in recognition. He hears you, Chief. He's going to hold you accountable. All right. Chief Drake, let me ask you, let's talk OPA, the Office of Professional Accountability. Mm-hmm. There has been a lot of criticism of that department. Folks have said that they called it corrupt. They said that it's been a conflict of interest. You have officers investigating other officers and people can't get a fair investigation. What is your response to that criticism? How accurate do you feel that it is or is not? And do you have any plans to restructure what OPA looks like?
Well, right now I'm evaluating the entire police department, but to answer that question, I worked in OPA back years ago when I was a sergeant, and I totally believe in officers investigating officers. One, no one likes a bad officer worse than a good officer, a good police officer. And so I had the opportunity to investigate people from the rank of officer to captain. I've had people that were demoted. I've had people that were terminated, had people that were sanctioned severely. And a lot of those officers take pride in what they do, and they really do believe in investigating. but also believe in transparency. And that's another reason why I believe in the COB, is that we have an alternative means to help build in that rapport as well. And so not only do we have the police department, and we've held a lot of people accountable. In fact, we've terminated and severely sanctioned a lot of people just to hold our own accountable. But then there's also that other mechanism of the COB that can help with transparency as well.
Now let's shift a little bit as we talk about kind of inside, looking at the makeup of the police department. And Bishop, I want to bring you in on this as well, because you got a mega church. Ain't no secret about that. So you probably have a lot of officers, potential future officers in your congregation. Chief, so to my understanding, there are about 156 African-American officers and 161 women officers, both of them on their own making up just a little bit over 10% of the total force, of the force. That's shocking.
That's shocking, and it's unacceptable. That's one of the first things I looked at, is that, how can we do differently when it comes to, one, attracting more women and minorities? And so I've been intentional about that. I've started a campaign really here in the police department called the Women of Mnpd. I don't know if you've noticed, but we've had some social media posts where we're highlighting our women and what they do and the value of what they contribute to this police department, but also minorities and how we can interact with, have better interaction with that. And so we're building our recruitment unit. So in the very near future, we're gonna have officers in the recruitment unit that look like the community we serve. So it's gonna be male blacks, female blacks, Hispanics, male white, female white. And so instead of people going to a website, nashville.gov/police, trying to find an application, they can actually have a face to interact with, someone that looks like them and someone that can give them actual knowledge. So my perception of that is that as we build the base of women and of minorities, then we can actually promote through the ranks. Then we can have more sergeants, more lieutenants, and even another chief of police or deputy chiefs that are African-American and women. Exactly.
So so you're saying we're not only going to recruit them to wear the badge, but promote them. Everybody hear me, give me a nice little amen in the comments down there. Even have them in high-ranking, decision-making, authoritative positions, and making the same salary, amen, as other people in the same positions, right? Because now we're on record.
Absolutely. The only way we can build up through the ranks is, one, to start with recruiting. And so we have a partnership with Nashville State Community College. And so we're going to, they're going to give our recruits 30 hours for attending the academy. And then we're going to have a pipeline for those officers or potential officers that want to come to the police department. We just announced that last week. So we're intentional about it. We're intentional about minorities, and we're intentional about women. We're still going to cast the net. We're still going to recruit, but we have to be intentional about, having more diversity.
So Bishop, oh yeah, go right ahead, because I was about to pull you on in. Go ahead.
Echo and say that's so important. As you mentioned earlier, our church, we have, quite a few of, African-American, Hispanic, and women who are officers in the Metro Police Department. And these are some extraordinary individuals who are so passionate about the communities they serve. I've watched them give up their lives and work just countless hours and just be so, involved in what's happening with families and communities, even after events occur. And I think it's important. I think it really is important that the police department represents the community it serves. And I think when you think about that 10 percentile in a city like Nashville with the diversity we have, that is unacceptable. And I do commend Chief for the efforts that are being made. And I hope that from this Facebook Live that people realize that, listen, if we're going to be a part of the solution, we're going to have people to actually be a part of the police department, to be a part of the change, be a part of the change we want to see. And so it's very important. It's important because when people go into situations that have some awareness of those families, those communities, and what they deal with, it's a different narrative than folks who come and have no idea whatsoever of what may be happening or may not even be invested in that community whatsoever. So I think it's a huge problem, but it's an opportunity as well.
Absolutely. And I want to remind everybody watching, of course, you get to ask your questions as well. It's not just me and my about 4 or 5 more pages full of questions. Put your comments and questions down there, because in just a few minutes, we're going to get to all the questions you want the chief and bishop to answer. Okay, so get to typing and snacking. It's dinner time. All right, so let's talk, Chief, because we've got, I mean, there's just an energy, a swell of energy right now for, you know, improvement in the police departments. And we have some groups here. We've seen thousands of people in the streets. We have grassroots groups. We've got Gideon's Army. We've got the Brothers Roundtable. We've got the Equity Alliance doing the work. What is your relationship with them, and how will you work with them moving forward and incorporating them in what you do? And Bishop, what role do you foresee you and the church playing to help facilitate that?
So to answer on my end, we've already begun to establish a rapport with Gideon's Army. We had a meeting just a couple of weeks ago with the MDHA about a partnership that we're going to try to have with Gideon's Army. And so that meeting is upcoming this week. I believe in violence interruption. I believe that those that already have connections in the community can help us. In fact, the North Precinct Commander, Terrence Graves, is already using Gideon's Army to some degree. When there's a homicide or whatever that occurs in the North Precinct, then he'll contact Gideon's Army to try to prevent a retaliatory type shooting. And so I want to expand on that. I want to build that relationship with them, with Bishop Campbell and others that can have violence interruption, but then also want to work with, bring all the groups together for a collaborative effort to where we can impact all of Nashville and not just a small segment. So.
Yeah, our political social action ministry, SOM, we call it, is very involved with all of these agencies. And, you know, the church, you know, is a partner alongside them, you know, whether it is, you know, the use of our facilities for meetings and strategizing, whether it's resources that we pour into these organizations, whether it's galvanizing people around the various initiatives they have. We are completely in, and we're excited to amp up our efforts. You see, the beauty of, I think, this moment for us is it creates an opportunity to reimagine what our community looks like, right? And I think the church, you know, really is that beacon light, that North Star. And we want to be that place. Mount Zion is centralized, our on Jefferson Street, 37208, need I say more? Like the epicenter of 37208 and what it means in terms of crime and the national narrative around that in and of itself. And all those amazing pastors and leaders and all those great organizations that are doing that work every single day, we partner with them and come together, and we're doing that. We're going to do more of that. I think this is what helps to deter. Even not only that, even working with the judicial system in terms of providing, you know, deterrence from prison, but giving people opportunities to work and to create other opportunities in terms of community involvement. That is the kind of thing where I think it takes an entire village to get involved and to really make a difference.
You know, and I totally agree to that. And I've floated the concept around, and we'll talk about it a little bit more in the police department, but looking at interventions, not just restorative justice, but look at interventions. So if John Drake commits a heinous crime or whatever, and I have 2 brothers that may go down that same pipeline, how do we intervene? So how do we bring the police department, schools, advocates, the church, and all the parties together to have meetings to try to identify those most at risk, and then how we provide them services, connect them to 100 Black Men or to other agencies to where we can help them be successful. I totally agree with collaboration.
And speaking of that, let's talk a little more about juvenile crime. I know there's, you know, the police department even had to create a task force just for juvenile crime. I believe it was maybe about 2 years ago, I think it was, not too long ago. But, you know, you've got juvenile crime. And then, you know, when you talk about community partners, we also did a discussion that was based from Coaches Against Violence, you know, that works with youth athletes, especially in the Metro Police Department. How do you plan to incorporate groups like that and also address juvenile crime? And juvenile use of force, let's address that, because I know that that is a particular area of concern. I just threw a bunch out there at you, but I think you can take it.
Yeah, that's fine. I think first and foremost, we have to keep guns away from kids. We have to figure out most of the guns that they're getting out of vehicles. Most of the vehicles are unlocked. So they get these guns, and sometimes they're getting keys, key fobs, and taking a vehicle as well. So now they have a conveyance to drive around town and commit their crimes, whether it be robbery, homicide, or whatever violent crimes they're committing. So the Juvenile Crimes Task Force was created just for that reason. One, to try to intercept some of these stolen cars, some of these guns, and prevent violent crime, and it's been successful. But what we're doing now is doing intelligence-led policing and not just casting a net over a bunch of juveniles, but we're trying to identify those are the most at problem, creating the most crime, and going to where they are. And there's certain areas where we've identified that we can be highly successful. We've recovered hundreds of guns, hundreds of cars, made several arrests. In fact, we had a group of individuals that was working in the Antioch area, and they had committed a series of 8 street robberies in a little over a 24-hour period. And so we put the Juvenile Crimes Task Force on them, and they were able to take them into custody. But incarceration is not the answer. Incarceration is solely, so then we have to have some other partnerships. And so the Juvenile Crimes Task Force is meeting with the juvenile court and other advocates to see how we can provide other services to try to prevent more kids from going down the same path. And so we need more collaboration.
I've got another question. I want to go back to something a little bit when we were talking about OPA and diversity. And then of course, Bishop Walker, again, I want you to continue to chime in here. Again, the question is, how can the church, because, you know, we're all individuals, but when you've got a collective body like the church that can advocate for you and has a direct line in that office, that is significant. You know, I want to ask you, there are about, I believe, 35 women in the police department who accused other officers of sexual harassment, and you responded to that. Mm-hmm. But beyond that, though, Chief, what is the plan to create a culture in which women feel safe, where women feel that they can report, you know, can come forward and report certain acts they say are committed against them? And then, Bishop Walker, to you, how can the church be an advocate for some that are victims within the police department?
So we've already created a hotline for the female police officers here that can call directly to our Human Resource Division and report any type of sexual harassment. So we have zero tolerance for that. I have zero tolerance, and I support the independent investigation to anything like this. We've also had Deputy Chief Loki, who's having meetings with our female officers, and so doing 20 to 25 at a time to talk about the importance of their role in the police department, to talk about if they're the victims of any kind of sexual harassment or any type of sexual violence. We want to know about it and want to hold them accountable, whether it be through the OPA investigation, whether it be COB or TBI. We want to know who they are, and we want to take care of that. We're going to keep building that culture that where it's positive and that everyone in the police department know they're a valued member and that they're free of any type of sexual harassment or violence.
And Bishop Walker, I know a lot of folks, when they're going through something, they come to the church. So how do you foresee the church really kind of standing in the gap for, you know, these women or anyone, you know, on the force who feels that they've been victimized?
Yeah, I think it's important. Again, you know, as our church, we have a variety of counseling services and support for folks who experience this kind of trauma. And I think that the church does have a role in that, to really help folks walk through that in a way, have support of the community and know that the community is standing with them. And listen, I think if there ever was a time, we know now more than ever that the protection of our women, particularly what we've just witnessed in Louisville, Kentucky, our women have experienced so much trauma, and we have got to be protectors of womanhood, and we have got to put systems in place to help educate all of our community around those areas, and then provide the kind of support and counseling to help folks get through it. So we're committed to doing that, absolutely.
All right, now everybody turn to your neighbor on chat live and say amen, because you heard it. There was a commitment right there. If named the permanent chief, he will commit to creating a safe an inviting culture where women and anyone else who's a victim of any type of violence within a department that's supposed to keep you safe can feel comfortable coming forward. And Bishop Walker just laid out all the resources that are already available, because again, sometimes people go to the church first. They go to God before anybody, and sometimes that's the only person they go to. So the church, no doubt, the go-between right there. Chief, let me ask you, if you are named permanent, what will be your top 3 priorities, especially with your beautiful grandson in mind, to create a department in a city that'll make him proud? What will be your your top 3 priorities? And Bishop, how you gonna hold him to it?
Well, my first three priorities would be to make a friendlier, more engaging police department. We're already headed in that direction. Also to build the police department that represents the community, to have diversity. I want my grandson to be, when he sees me on TV, he calls me, and I'll put out something we say in my family, he calls me Diddy. And so when he sees me, he goes nuts and he says, "That's my Diddy."
Oh, that's my new hashtag now, Chief Diddy. You done told something.
So he gets excited. And then I want to have a collaboration and rapport to where we can help our community by empowering them, and not just going in with a warrior mindset and, hey, we know it all and we can police an area, but we can work with collaborations in the community and reduce crime by having our neighborhoods. And so those are my top 3 priorities. 1, engaging and having a more friendlier officer, more connection with the community, a more diverse police department, and then a different approach to reacting to crime.
Yeah, so imagine a clergy accountability, task force. Imagine pastors coming together and saying, we need to talk. We need to talk regularly. Here's what our community is feeling. Here's what's going on. Here's the pulse of the community. Here's what we need to have addressed. And in order for those things to come to fruition, there have to be, measurables. There have to be things that we come back and say, how are we doing? Are we still at 10%? How are we doing? Because I say that to say, yes, holding the chief accountable, but also saying we're partnering with you. So if you're having some recruitment issues, if I'm pastoring 33,000 people, majority African Americans, I need to say to my congregation, we're going to have a metro police, job fair. We need those of you to, really do it in our congregation, like be a part of the solution. All these things that we're talking about really come down to, I believe, leaders in that community, clergy who, have their feet on the ground, myself and so many others, to say, look, we want you to know that we are here. We want to share with you where people are, and we want our people to know that we're in conversation consistently. And I think that's what builds that rapport again.
Mm-hmm.
All right. I hear that. All right. Well, everybody, hey, we're getting your questions. I'm not ignoring anybody. I'm getting my questions here. Thank you very much. Chief, Bishop, we've got some questions that are starting to roll in, if it's okay. This isn't my show, but to my producer there on the other end, if I could start it with about 2 minutes or so early to get these questions in. Chief, what is the policy on police pulling up while you're sitting in the car in front of your home? Can you speak to that a little bit?
That's a really open-ended question. One, police department shouldn't pull up on anyone unless they have probable cause for whatever reason, whether it be they had a call for service or because they witnessed a crime being committed, or some type of reasonable suspicion, and they have to be very articulable about those kind of facts. They can't just randomly pull up on someone that's sitting in their driveway, sitting in their home, because you have rights, and your home is sacred. And so we don't advocate that. They have to have probable cause to pull in anyone's driveway, anyone's residence, enter anyone's home. They just can't do it without a legal reason.
The next question, how do you and will you, if named permanent, deal with bad officers who are protected by the badge?
Well, I've been on record for that. I just believe in holding anyone accountable. One, it mars the image of the police department. It deteriorates the trust of the community. And so we have to hold those accountable. And so what we talk about is making the right decision, having ethics, using what you've been trained to do, and then going by your oath of office that you're there for the entire community, not just one segment, but the entire community. And so whatever community you're in, you have to treat people fairly and without bias. And you have to be, and I totally will hold them accountable for any actions that's outside of those norms.
The next question, will there be thorough backgrounds completed for police officers? I know, there's a counselor, I can't remember offhand. I know that there's discussion before about doing more thorough backgrounds about who we choose to wear the badge and keep us safe. So will there be thorough backgrounds for police officers?
Yeah, and I've looked at our background and it can be improved. And I totally agree that, I think we have to be careful about who we bring in, who we train, and who we give a weapon to, and who we charge to interact with the community. In fact, we had an individual that put in for the police department, and he was asked, what have you done to prepare for the academy? And he said he had trained defensive tactics, which is, combat skills, and that he's done weapons training. So I'm like, that's it. No, we don't need you. We need people to use their mind. We want people to be able to de-escalate, be able to have a conversation with people. And my 32 years, I've only been in one fight, and it was the middle of 16th and Joe Johnson with two people that were attacking me. So
wait, what? You was on Joe Johnson?
Yeah.
Okay, all right. We're gonna get to that in a minute.
Yeah. So in 32 years, I haven't had to use force because the theory that I have, I'd rather have a 30-minute conversation than a 30-second fight. So I'm going to try to use my speech and try to de-escalate as much as possible. And it's worked for me. And that's the mindset we need to have when we recruit people as well.
The next question, will you commit to the timely release of information in the unfortunate event of an officer-involved shooting involving a citizen of color?
I would absolutely love to, but it comes down to the Tennessee Bureau of Investigation. They don't even release the information to us. But they won't even give us tips on where their investigations are. They still have investigations now that they're completing. And so I'm awaiting their findings. But if we could come up with a system to where we could immediately disseminate that. In fact, I've had a conversation with Mr. Don Aaron about that. We'd very much like to do that. And even with like the Edge Hill incident, I believe that if we get that information out there early, provide whatever video, whatever commentary, then it just builds more trust and it's better for everyone.
And I do want to point out for everyone watching, and correct me if I'm wrong, Chief, there is an MOU or memorandum of understanding between the police department and TBI that if there's an officer involved shooting, then TBI comes in to investigate to ensure a fair investigation. Is that correct?
That's true. They do. That's for any officer involved shooting that involves a death. So.
Okay, very good. All right. Is there a budget allocated for violence interruption? I know you mentioned there's some work with, say, Gideon's Army that has violence interrupters, but we talking money, Chief. Is there a budget for that?
Well, our budget is kind of constrained, but we'll do whatever we can to make headway with them. One approach that we've used is the MDHA has funding. And so they've already committed to providing funding for violence interruption. So that's one way around the budget, especially during these tight times where they're talking about a tax referendum and how we could be laying off people and the city could be in dire straits. So we're looking for methods, but as we get more into violence interruption, and as I, as police chief, can implement some of these strategies, one is to put in a budget for violence interruption. I've already talked to Cure Violence, reached out to them through email. And so Gideon's Army actually provides the same thing. So we want to make sure that whatever funding, I'm going to ask for it, because I know this is going to lead us successfully to reducing violent crime.
Okay. All right. Now, I know you weren't in the position of acting chief at the time that the body cameras were rolled out, but surely you were high ranking at the time. You can maybe give us some insight on this. Someone wants to know, why was the police department close to Belle Meade given body cameras first when other areas in Nashville appeared to need them as well? Do you know the answer to that?
I wouldn't say Belle Meade. It was the West Precinct. It was just decided. I'm not sure it was the chief at the time why he decided on West Nashville. I don't know if it's because of the infrastructure they already have built, but it's going to be west, then I believe it's going to be east and maybe north and others. By the fall of 2021, every officer should have those, and every proactive officer should have those as well.
All right. And then the next question, how do we ensure police officers complete diversity and inclusion training? And let me add to that, what changes do you see need to be made to training for officers when it comes to sensitivity of other diverse groups?
You know, we do that in the training academy with all of our officers. They have to go through diversity and inclusion training for about 20 hours. Then every year after that, we have in-service training where we go through that and continue to build on that. Also, every officer goes to the civil rights room at the public library to look at the history of this city and how policing and how the civil rights movement all was here in Nashville, to learn more about it and to be more inclusive. We talk about implicit bias. We train on that, and explicit, and just all of those things to make sure that our officers realize that we all have biases, but we all have to be fair. And so we have fair and impartial policing too, is to go with that. And so we'll continue to build on that. That's been just big for me. I've done a lot of de-escalation as well. So all of these things are to make better for our community.
Bishop, we've got a question for you. What's the church planning to do to bridge the diversity gaps in the Nashville community? You talked already, y'all have got circles, you've got support, you've got future officers and some high-ranking ones, because Chief said he's gonna promote them. But you know, what is the church gonna do to bridge those diversity gaps?
Well, as I mentioned to you, in terms of creating job fairs, working with the department to say, look, let's host a job fair at our ministry. Let's do that. Let's create an awareness campaign with policing, not only in terms of sharing some of the concerns that people have and some of the solutions that are coming down the pipe, but also sharing even some of the policies that a lot of the people in our community aren't aware of, or it's just too cumbersome to try to sort through that, and creating a space even on our website to really be kind of a liaison between the policing and the community to say, here's a resource page, things you need to know, and then opportunities for folks to really be a part. We have so many college students who major in criminal justice who come from all around the country. And you know, we have 9 universities we busing college students, and I talk to them all the time, and so you don't have to go back. Nashville's a great place, it's growing, and a lot of those kids who stay, and kids who come, graduated, and they're now a part of the police department. And I think we have a great opportunity. So I really think it's about an awareness campaign and also creating that job fair to really create opportunities for folks to know, hey, you know, this is a great time to be a part of the police department.
Bishop, I want to ask you, because I saw your Instagram post, if we can talk about that for a little minute, following the Breonna Taylor announcement, where it was announced that none of the officers were charged with murder in that case, to the disappointment of many. What do you as a pastor say? And for those who are watching, for those who come to your services Wednesday and Sunday and in between, what do you say to people who want to feel safe, who could, maybe should, depending on how you put it, have faith in these men and women who take an oath to protect and serve them? But for some people, they feel less safe when they come around. In this age, what do you say to them? What's my husband's minister? What do you say? Preach a word of hope, preach a hope. What do you say?
Well, first of all, I say, you know, I understand your anger, because I'm angry. You know, as a Black man, you know, I am, when I leave the church, you know, I'm not Bishop Walker, I'm a Black man. I drive through my neighborhood and I get pulled over, I'm fearful for my own life, wondering if that's a road cop, wondering if, you know, if this person knows who I am or not, you know, I'm gonna have to, I'm always putting, you know, my hand on the steering wheel, and I'm nervous and shaking. You know, I'm at 11 and 2, and I'm thinking about my 2-year-old son, raising my 2-year-old son up in this kind of environment, that we're still having to deal with these systemic issues that politicians don't think are systemic. And unfortunately, I think that's a larger conversation, but I do believe that our community will really heal. I believe we can heal. I think that we really have to look at the administration of justice, not just in policing, but all the way up through the judiciary system, and look at policies and things. You know, the fact that that officer could be charged with shooting a wall and almost killing someone and not, you know, be charged. And I know there are circumstances I may not be aware. I'm not a lawyer, but I've got quite a few of my congregation that advise me and I talk to, and I get their thoughts on it. And it's unfortunate. And when you think about Tennessee, we're a state that, you know, I think our attorney general is not elected, it's appointed. It's different, right? And so we're one of the only states that are like that. And our hope is that if that kind of situation occurred in our state, that the right thing will be done. You know, justice has been delayed for so long. The people are hurting, and there is so much lament. And as a leader, I often, you know, struggle for the words to explain. And particularly as a bridge builder, someone out here trying to make a difference, someone on both sides advocating, you know, on every community I'm engaged. I want to see our community come together, and then this kind of thing happens and people are like, what's going on? I'm like, you don't know yet. You don't understand why we're so angry. You don't understand how this goes back to every generation of Black folks in America. And so I just think that it's time for us to be heard, to understand that protest, as Dr. King said, is the language of the oppressed. And we have to not only protest, but we really have to be engaged in the community. And I'll say this and I'm done. A part of hope is never giving up on what's possible.
Oof.
You know, when you give up on what's possible, then you basically surrender to the forces that seek to demolish you. We are people who are resilient. We've come through the Middle Passage. Our scholars, our incredible folks who built HBCUs and built incredible institutions, have done all these extraordinary things. These are folks that continue to believe in spite of all the forces that were against them. And we are a generation who cannot lose hope. And we cannot look cynically and critically upon those who are trying to maintain hope and work these relationships, because these things are not going to just happen in the street. They're going to happen at the table. And we need folks who are soldiers on the street, but we need folks who have sense at the table.
Look, you about to have me go grab my purse and throw $1 at the altar of my iPad because you done preached the word. I didn't look. This isn't Wednesday or Sunday, okay? You over here preaching. All right. Gentlemen, let me ask you all both. There is, without question, a strain in the relationship between the Black community and the police department. How did we get here, and how can we get out of here? It doesn't matter if you agree with one side or the other. You cannot deny that there's a strain. How do we fix it?
So if I can start with that, the history of policing started in an adverse way. It started with slave patrols, and throughout the history of policing, it hadn't been on the right side of law either. And so a lot of that is inherent. The mentality to go in and over-police neighborhoods, that's systemic because of poverty, education, and other things. So you go into these areas and you deteriorate trust. And I think we need to build bridges, and that's why I'm doing the community engagement efforts, is that people, once officers get in and they meet the community, then they value them and they value the sanctity of life. At the same time, the community gets to know the officers and get to value them as well. And so then you can have collaborations, you can have conversations. And I think that's what's been missing. It's been that warrior mentality. I'm gonna come in your neighborhood and I'm gonna do all these things in effort to help you by, you know, reducing crime, but I'm gonna do all these tactics, but I'm not gonna get to know who you are. I'm not gonna be your friend. I'm not gonna be engaging and friendly to you. So we're eliminating that. We want people to know who we are and engage them in a friendly manner. And that's how we're going to continue moving forward.
Bishop, what, do you have any 2 cents to add to that, what the fix is? Or do you feel like we've kind of already touched on that?
Agreed. I think Chief was right on point with the historical model of policing, where it comes from. You're dealing with 17th century model of slavery. You're dealing with the Constitution that was written and policies that are being enforced in 2020 that were actually a part of a Constitution that we as Black folk were not even seeing as human. So as a consequence, you're rolling those same policies into the day. That's why you can invade a person's space and how you police slaves or how you police people like that. And I think it does take a great deal of sensitivity. It takes folks who look like us, understand our community, to really be able to help move this needle forward. And I truly appreciate what Chief Drake is doing. I've had a conversation, when Mark Glenn was over TBI, he was very much involved. I work with him. It's great in terms of just really trying to build this kind of alliance as well with policing and community, because these are the kinds of things that make a difference. You cannot do policing without talking to key stakeholders in the community and have those relationships strengthened so that you can move this needle forward. So.
All right, well, we are getting close to the end of our program. I've got just a couple of things I want to get out before I turn it over to you, Bishop. One more quick question for you before I got a little something special to do in just a minute. But Chief, for you, how do you balance, and how will you plan to balance it if you're named Chief, being a Black man in Nashville, but also a member of the police department, when there's a strain that exists between the two? How are you going to balance, maybe pressure from both sides? You've got Black Lives Matter, you've got Blue Lives Matter, you've got All Lives Matter. I imagine that's a lot of stress for you, and you can't satisfy everybody. How are you going to balance that pressure?
Well, the way I balance is to have conversations with people. I'm a public servant. I'm 100% in to help our communities, to empower anyone, to create safety. And I want to have that rapport with anyone. And so if it's Black Lives Matter or any other group, I want to build those relationships beforehand. And so that's going to be my goal. I've already had meetings with other people. And so it's not really stress for me. It's what I signed up to do. I enjoy challenges, and the challenge is trying to bring communities together as a police officer. People don't know the history of my family, but I actually had a member of my family, it was a cousin, that was killed in 1974 by actually a member of this police department. And I remember going to the funeral as a kid and viewing all this and growing up with these thoughts of police officers. But as later in life, I learned that if I wanted to make a difference, I needed to be a part of it. And I needed to be a part of interacting. And so my heart is with the community, and I can balance the police officers, I can balance the community, and I can balance groups. And it's not a lot of stress, because I feel like it's, I've told people, and I've said on air, there's some type of movement pushing me for this. I don't know if it's divine or what's going on, but I want to make this successful for Nashville and make it the model community for our country.
Okay. All right. And just these last couple of quick questions. Yana, but see, we really got to get to know you, okay? Bishop, you're a part of this too, okay? This is called Get to Know Them, all right? We're going to have fun. So now you have to answer, I do this all the time, welcome. You have to answer the first thought now. You can't think, okay? All right, Chief, you're up first. Grits, salt and pepper or sugar?
Salt and pepper.
Bishop, what you got?
Salt and pepper.
So you said salt and pepper?
Salt and pepper.
All right, all right. Ketchup, in the pantry or in the fridge?
In the fridge.
The fridge.
Really? I hate cold ketchup. Ooh. Okay. All right. French fries, curly or straight?
Straight.
Straight.
All right. Now on your fried fish sandwich, all right, are you putting coleslaw in that mug? Or are you putting spaghetti on there? What's with your fried fish?
Spaghetti.
Oh God.
What?
I'd go spaghetti. Just a thought. I mean, I'm more of a hot sauce person, but I'd go spaghetti. So.
Man, what you said? Okay, thank you for the hot sauce. All right.
Yeah.
Last one: water, tea, or soda?
Water.
Bishop?
Water all day.
Water all the way. All right, all right. Well, gentlemen, I want to thank you for letting me ask you these questions. Everybody watching, I want to thank you, but don't go anywhere. First of all, continue this conversation, sharing what you've been hearing on social media. Also, if you don't do anything else, register to vote. I don't care who you're going to vote for. I just want to make sure you vote, all right? You know we've got a big election coming up in November. We've got the deadline to register coming up in October. Forgive me, I have a bunch of dates in my head. If anyone remembers, put it out there. It's in October coming up. But I believe it's about 20-something days outside, or 30 days outside of the election date. So you got to hurry up and get registered to vote. I am so honored you all had me here. I had so much fun. But listen, I can't send you off like the great Bishop can. Bishop, you got to send us home. You don't preach the word. Now give us a prayer.
Well, Harriet, let me just say finally, thank you so much. And thank you, Chief Drake, for this
Thank
wonderful
you.
conversation. It's so timely, and for those who are watching. And, I believe our community, similar to what the children of Israel were going through at a time under Pharaoh, and they were oppressed and they were dealing with an intimidation campaign. They were getting larger and Pharaoh was trying to control, and they were under so much oppression that God was send a deliverer. And what our city needs is a chief that can really bring about liberation for our people, can advocate and be an ally to those key stakeholders in the community. I appreciate Chief Drake, and I appreciate our mayor's decision that he has to make, and I'll be praying for our mayor as he makes this decision. I do think it's important for us not to view negatively someone who comes out of the department, because remember, Moses was a Hebrew, but he was raised as an Egyptian, and he was sent to Egypt to liberate the Hebrew people because he learned the ways of Egypt and he knew their language and understood what to fix, and God would use him and raise him up at the right time. So however God chooses to use you, Chief Drake, thank you for being used now, and know that we're praying for you in this process. And for all of you, thank you so much. Lord, thank you for this wonderful time we've had, this conversation, and we pray that it stimulates collaboration, a greater community of what Nashville can be, of all of us, black, brown, yellow, white, all of us can be who you called us to be together, as this bridge is built to be one Nashville. In your name we pray. Amen.
Amen.
Good
Thank
night,
you so
everybody.
much for having me on. I truly appreciate Bishop Walker, Ms. Wallace. Thank you so much, and thank you for the prayer. And I'll do my best, and so we'll see what happens in the future. So,
Thank you all.
Thank you. Good night, everybody.